Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another DFO Fantasy Show. It's Thursday, January 22nd. I'm your host, Brock Seguin, managing fantasy editor of dailyfaceoff.com. Today, we've got fantasy hockey news notes. We've got Brock's Lock of the Day, and then we'll get joined by Dylan Berthiaume. We'll go over the fantasy hockey playoffs strength of schedule to help determine which players you should be trying to trade away, which players you should be trying to trade for, maybe players you should be picking up on the waiver wire, maybe players you were thinking about dropping that you should hold on to, maybe players that you think you should be dropping that you should just drop. But let's start with the fantasy hockey news and notes. We will start with the New Jersey Devils. They placed Luke Hughes on LTIR. He will not undergo surgery, but he will be sidelined through the Olympic break, but no timeline for his return has been provided as of now. Next, the Sabres signed Josh Doan to a 7-year contract extension worth $6.95 million AAV. Obviously not super fantasy relevant, but good news for the Sabres and Josh Doan. Good AAV for him, who's got 35 points in 49 games, including 15 goals so far in his first year with the Sabres. Rasmus Andersson still trying to go through his visa issues here after getting traded from Calgary to Vegas. So he's not expected to make his Vegas Golden Knights debut on Thursday unless something changes, but he has not been ruled out for Friday as of now. Mason Marchment is expected to return to the Blue Jackets lineup on Thursday. Marchment had 7 points, including 5 goals in his first 7 games with the Blue Jackets before he got hurt. So let's see if he can pick up where he left off under new head coach Rick Bowness. Anthony Cirelli, who left Tuesday's game with an injury, is expected to play Friday in Chicago. Obviously, a Canadian Olympian. There was concerns that maybe he could miss the Olympics, but not a serious injury at all. He's expected to be back Friday. The Lightning have a Friday, Saturday back-to-back, so look for him to play this weekend. Darcy Kemper, also a Canadian Olympian, who got hurt on Tuesday. His injury sounds like it could be a little bit more serious, but as of right now, he's considered day-to-day. He is still undergoing evaluation for the upper body injury that he suffered on Tuesday. Then a trio of players here, Chris Letang, Mason McTavish, Jonathan Huberdeau, all missed their games on Wednesday, and are questionable to play in their respective next game. So Letang, obviously big injury there. Didn't seem to matter in Calgary, but injury to Letang and Erik Karlsson leaving the Penguins blue line extremely short-handed right now. Massive minutes for Brett Kulak. Ryan Shea moved up to the top power play unit. Not super fantasy relevant. And then lastly, Oliver Ekman-Larsson left Wednesday's game with a lower body injury and did not return. So not massively fantasy relevant, but a player that has been very, very important for the Toronto Maple Leafs as of late. So that's going to do it for the fantasy hockey news and notes. Let's get to Brock's Lock of the Day, where we picked up a W last night. Brent Burns had 3 shots on goal, cashing the over 2.5 shots on goal at plus 130. So nice to get back in the green. Hopefully we can do so again tonight. And as always, the Brock's Lock of the Day is powered by our friends at 5v5 Hockey. So we will take a look at their model. Not a lot of shot props that I like tonight. Like a lot, if you want to get creative and maybe parlay 2 of them together to get some better odds, I don't mind that play because there's a lot of solid shot props tonight that are paying like minus 190 that I just won't play individually. So packaging a couple of them together might be an okay play. The point prop is probably where I'm going today. Again, there's some decent ones here, all of which though paying some big money, you got Victor Arvidsson here at plus 120. Don't mind that. Tomas Hertl minus 154. Okay. Alex Tuck minus 130. But I'm going to go down here to Dylan Cousins at plus 100. He comes into Thursday playing some of his best hockey of the season. He's registered a point in 4 straight games, tallying 3 goals and 3 assists in that process. Dating back to early January, he has points in at least 1 point in 12 of his last 21 games. That is a 57.1% hit rate, or the equivalent of minus 133. And tonight you can bet it. I've seen it anywhere from plus 100 to plus 105. So plus money for sure this evening, and he's been converting at minus 133 over his last 21 games. And I think what's most encouraging for Cousins in this point prop tonight is that he was recently had his wingers changed, and he went to getting Brady Tkachuk and Ridley Gregg on his flanks. And the trio has been extremely dominant since being put together, averaging 3.4 expected goals, 4 per 60, 31.5 scoring chances, 4 per 60. So his new 5v5 line, and he's still on the top power play unit, that deployment should give him plenty of chances to get on the score sheet tonight in Nashville, where they face a Predators team that has given up 3.65 goals against per 60 over their last 10 games, which is the 7th worst mark in the NHL. So give me Dylan Cousins anytime point, plus 100 or plus 105, depending on where you are betting. That's Brock's lock of the day. Hopefully we can stay hot. Now let's welcome in our friend, Dylan Berthiaume. I'm now joined by our guy, Dylan Berthiaume. The Detroit Red Wings swept your Toronto Maple Leafs. It's the first time that's probably happened in a long time. So I know I'm happy about it. I'm sorry for you. I guess before we get into the meat and potatoes here of fantasy hockey, like,
sure,
what are your thoughts on the Leafs right now? Like, where are they? Are they a playoff team still?
I think over the last, where are we at right now? About a month's time, they've played like a playoff team. It's just a matter of if it's too much to overcome at this point. There's really nothing left in the cupboard in terms of trade chips come the deadline. So I would almost rather them just try to push it with this build here. The lack of the first round pick and is a bit of a concern, but I think you just got to take that as a wash at this point. Hope you don't fall somewhere in that 6 to 10 range, because it is a top 5 protected pick. That seems unlikely to me at this point. But yeah, they've been a much better watch for the last, like I said, month or so. Feels maybe it's a little bit too little too late, and maybe they are still just a piece away from going. I think it's something like, to get to 95 points, they need like 19 wins down the stretch here. So you throw one heater in there and then you're really just looking at 500 hockey the rest of the way. So doable. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's gonna be close. It's gonna be close.
The craziest thing is, like, they've gotten hot, but the Atlantic Division, they've basically made up no ground. Just how good that Atlantic Division has been playing. Montreal hot, Detroit hot, Buffalo red hot. It's an insane division, a division that went from being terrible to extremely good. You're talking about making some trades for the Maple Leafs. We're going to be talking about making some trades here in fantasy hockey today. And what I did was taking a look at the strength of schedule for the playoffs. So what I did was we built a schedule tool that grades every team week by week during the fantasy playoffs. We did weeks 22, 23, 24. Every league I'm in has that schedule. Every league you're in has that schedule. So we focused on week 22, 23, 24 playoffs. And for each team, each week gets a score based on how many games they have and how tough the opponents are relative to the rest of the league for that week. And those weekly scores are combined into an overall playoff schedule grade. And I put a small emphasis on consistency, because you want to have 3 good weeks as opposed to like 1 really good week and 2 shitty weeks. It really doesn't make a difference. So teams with 3 solid weeks will rate out a little bit better than the teams with great ones, or 1 great one and 2 bad ones, excuse me. So let's get into it, because we've got a lot of options here to trade for, some to trade away. We'll focus on teams with the good schedules and who we might want to target from those teams, and then we'll focus on the teams that have bad schedules that we might want to, players you might want to move on from. So we'll start with the St. Louis Blues. They have the best schedule grade overall, 3 really good weeks. So the only team that graded out with 3 good weeks. And the problem is with the St. Louis Blues, D, is they don't really have anybody that you'd want to trade for. They don't score a lot of goals. So are you looking to make a move for any St. Louis Blues? Because obviously the schedule is great. They've got a couple options that might work out. I think this is the other thing you just talked about is real hockey trades. And are the Blues a team that's going to be looking to shop some of these guys at the deadline, and then trading for them now in fantasy hockey will be moot, come March?
Yeah, I think one guy that I'd be really shocked if they do move is Robert Thomas, and he's seen his own percentage drop of late because of the injury. He's just 69% owned right now. So I think if you have room to stash on your IR, he's a guy worth going after, even like kind of shallower, more competitive leagues. He is hitting the wire as well. Timeline of about 2 weeks right now on that injury, meaning he might not return before the Olympic break, but should be well rested by the time the NHL resumes in late February. So Thomas, we know what he is, right? He's not going to fill the back of the net for you, but he is going to fill the stat sheet with those assists. So it's still a guy that I'm quite keen on given the schedule down the stretch. And like I said, a guy that I would be pretty shocked if the Blues do end up moving this season. Jordan Kyrou probably a little bit more likely in terms of a potential trade candidate IRL. But again, this is kind of more someone I'm not going after on the fantasy trade market, but maybe worth either holding on to or stashing. His ownership down to 47%. So yeah, certainly out there in a lot of leagues, but he is kind of turning a corner of late. He's got points in 4 of his last 5, shot volume trending in the right direction. It's been a big issue this year, but he's averaging just under 3 shots a night in his last 8 games, kind of more in line with what we're used to seeing out of Jordan Kyrou. Really tough season all around, but I think part of that dip of production has been a dip in ice time and his ability to create chances. But poor fortune also definitely been playing a factor, shooting just 9.3% for a career 13.3% shooter. On-ice shooting percentage on the low side as well at 9.3%. So I think just maybe that luck turns from down the stretch given this light schedule. And if it coincides with a bump in ice time, then Kyrou could be a difference maker in the fantasy playoffs. But again, yeah, someone I think is more likely to get moved IRL. So not someone I'm looking to move assets for, but if he's hitting the wire or if I've got him on the bottom of my roster, maybe someone that I'm still looking to hold on to in the meantime. Otherwise, I think it's really just going to be a matter of this is a team that's going to offer us a lot of quality streaming options down the stretch.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going. I think like when the time comes, Jimmy Snuggerud's probably somebody you might want to stream in the playoffs, something like that. But yeah, I guess if anything, nothing else, it gives you a reason to maybe have some hope for some of these St. Louis Blues. Next on the list is the Philadelphia Flyers, and I think they've got a couple of assets that are a little bit more interesting. For me, I think Travis Konechny is probably the prime candidate. Looking at his underlying numbers, does feel like somewhat of just a regular old buy low candidate, a guy that's probably due for a little bit of positive regression. He's got a couple goals scored below expected. The on-ice goals below expected is among the worst on the Philadelphia Flyers. So he's definitely had some poor fortune and, should probably have better numbers to date. But I think Trevor Zegras is another name that I would probably be interested in moving for. I just think that, you're probably paying maximum value for Trevor Zegras given what he's done so far this season, where Konechny feels a little bit more like a buy low candidate. So let's take a look at some of the teams with bad playoff schedules as well. And the Detroit Red Wings, Seattle Kraken, Pittsburgh Penguins, Minnesota Wild, Edmonton Oilers, Winnipeg Jets, New York Islanders, Calgary Flames, Washington Capitals. Those are the teams that all have one or fewer good weeks overall. The Capitals have the worst schedule by a mile. Just terrible stuff. The Flyers are very interesting because their first 2 weeks, they're a super interesting buy because their first 2 weeks of the playoffs are as good as any two in the playoffs. Problem is their final score is not very good. But I honestly, I thought long and hard about waiting the first 2 weeks a little bit heavier because just getting to the finals, you've got a chance. So I like the Flyers a lot with the really good schedule in weeks 1 and 2 of the playoffs. And then the finals, once you're there, anything can happen. So I think Travis Konechny for me is one player that I'm really, really looking to go after. Just going to throw a couple of trades out here for you. If you were looking to target Konechny based on the teams that have terrible playoff schedules, I mean, Alexander Ovechkin for Konechny, I think that's something that probably gets accepted. Maybe Bo Horvat for Konechny. You might want Konechny plus. Horvat's played well, but he's obviously injured right now. I think you could throw out Gabe Vilardi for Konechny's, not with Scheifele and Connor anymore, but if people are just looking at the raw stats in the season, I think it makes sense. Vilardi for Konechny. Maybe Joel Eriksson-Ek, maybe Ricard Raquel. Those are the types of players with these bad playoff schedules that I would be at least throwing out there to try to acquire Travis Konechny. So what are your thoughts on Konechny and maybe even Zegras as well?
Yeah, I agree. I think they're both going to be quality options. And I do agree kind of with your idea that it's more important to worry about getting there. And by that point, if you're in the finals, you're really just a coin flip away. And, it's probably going to come down to a lot of luck at that point anyway. I think Konechny's kind of a sneaky build because I agree. I think if, he wasn't experiencing some of this poor fortune, we'd be looking at a serious breakout season right now. And the thing that could still kind of make him a bit of a sneakier buy low is if you're just looking at his raw production profile, it's kind of closer to where he's been at in recent years, right? He's got 44 points in 48 games still. It was 76 and 82 last year, 68 and 76 the year before that. So it's right in line with where he's been. I think you can kind of target him in the sense that you're going after someone with kind of that around a similar point per game production profile. And people maybe not realize that, Konechny's kind of just scraping the ceiling in terms of the potential that he could offer you this season, especially down the stretch, given those light weeks that he'll have come to fantasy playoffs. So I like him as a target a lot. I think a lot of those names make sense. I think Ovechkin in particular, someone that I'm probably looking for, running out of gas down the stretch, perhaps. Drop down the lineup of late, just what they're doing with their lineup in general right now, I don't love from a fantasy perspective. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. And just in general, a name worth having on the radar. I agree. Konechny's probably the preferred target here, just in terms of the perceived value versus the real value. But Ziger's certainly someone that I also think can offer you a ton of value down the stretch.
Next on the list is the Montreal Canadiens. Really, a similar schedule to the Flyers, where the first 2 weeks are a little bit stronger than their finals week, not quite as strong as the Flyers. And then keep in mind, obviously, all of this is based on defensive team quality right now in January 22nd. This is probably going to change. We will probably revisit this in a month's time, right before the fantasy hockey trade deadline, because obviously teams' defensive quality is going to change, but it shouldn't change a ton. So just keep that in mind. But I like the Montreal Canadiens as a target as well. I think there's obviously a lot of names in Montreal that you could look at to acquire. You'd be paying a premium, obviously, for guys like Cole Caulfield, for Nick Suzuki. Ivan Demidov and Juraj Slafkovsky have really come on as of late. I've been a little bit hesitant with the two of them, just because their underlying metrics at 5v5 were so disastrous early in the season. They've really turned a corner as of late. They still have scored a ton of goals above expected, which makes me a little weary. But like, Demidov has just passes the eye test, right? When you watch the Montreal Canadiens play, he's always kind of around it, always creating chances. So I think Demidov, like, the overall profile on the season isn't amazing. So in redraft formats, I don't think it'll be too difficult to acquire Demidov. Obviously, in those keeper and dynasty formats, it'll be near impossible. But there's so many names here, available to you from the Montreal Canadiens that I would be certainly looking to acquire. I mean, if we're talking about Nick Suzuki, I'd be throwing out like Bo Horvat, Dylan Larkin. Those are two teams with bad playoff schedules that I think have similar value to a Nick Suzuki, and somebody that you could certainly look to move to acquire him. In terms of Cole Caulfield, I think it's a lot more difficult. You'd probably be looking at like a Kyle Connor. You might want to get Caulfield plus for Kyle Connor, but like, that would be a name that, based on the schedules, might make some sense. Maybe Lucas Raymond, you throw that one out there. Lucas Raymond for Caulfield, I think, is a decent 1-for-1. And then for somebody like Demidov, you could be looking at Patrick Kane. You could be looking at Ricard Raquel. Those are the types of names that in redraft formats, I think, that could get the job done to acquire somebody like Demidov. So who is maybe the most interesting names for you in Montreal, and who would you be potentially avoiding?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anyone that I'm avoiding per se. I would just be wary of overpaying for Demidov, just based on some of the the concerns that you highlighted. I think if it wasn't for the schedule down the stretch, he'd be one of my top sell high candidates across the league overall. He's got that crazy 19.7 on ice shooting percentage, so there's just no way that holds. But I do think, like you said, down the stretch, that there's obviously the chance that he gets hot again, given the schedule. So maybe for me, it's just someone that I'm kind of reassessing where I stand on that, in terms of someone that I've been looking to sell for quite some time. But yeah, I just think it's tough because, when you play for a premier team like this, they've been performing for as well as they do, like, the price tag is just going to be pretty steep. So it's obviously worth kind of kicking the tires on and seeing what you might be able to get in terms of the return. But there's just so much hype around these guys right now because, like I said, they play in such a big market, but also just the fact that, they're young players and they're kind of just coming into their form right now. And those are the toughest ones to kind of pry free from fantasy managers, even in redraft leagues. Like, it's just so exciting to think about the potential of this team overall, not just moving forward for years to come, but the rest of this season. So yeah, I think Caulfield, if there's any way, even as Zach Hyman was a name that you threw out, pre-show, he's got 19 goals in 31 games, just been on fire of late. So maybe, is that like the building blocks of something you can do for Caulfield? I doubt there's anyone that would move Caulfield for Hyman straight up in redraft leagues, but maybe you can do some sort of 2-for-1 there, package him with some of the other names that we've thrown out already, to try and get a name like Caulfield over the line. So yeah, it's kind of where I'm at. I'm a little bit weary of overpaying, but certainly worth kicking the tires on these guys because they've been so good, and overall it looks like it's going to continue down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and I've had some pushback in terms of, from the Canadiens fans, like, the eye test and maybe the numbers don't exactly line up, and you could see why Ivan Demidov is a player that could potentially carry a high on ice shooting percentage with how much offense he does generate. But it's like, okay, Connor McDavid doesn't carry an on ice shooting percentage like that, so it does make you nervous that there is regression coming. But it's been basically a full season of this, and it hasn't really changed, which is pretty surprising. So yeah, I'm obviously a little nervous, but the playoff schedule, I guess, kind of eases some of those concerns, and hopefully they can get rolling in the playoffs. Let's get to the Anaheim Ducks now, who pretty balanced schedule, really strong semifinal schedule. So if you can kind of get past that first round, you're looking like adding some of these Ducks pieces could be something that could push you over the edge to get you to the finals. And I think that they are a very interesting team to target right now because of how much they've cooled off. And I think a lot of, I've seen it on the DFO starting goalies chat a lot, like a lot of questions regarding the Anaheim Ducks and what to do with some of these players because their owners were so excited about what they were doing early in the season. And now we're getting a little bit frustrated with guys like Cutter Gauthier, and Leo Carlsson really cooled off before he got hurt. Jackson Lacombe has been relatively quiet as of late. I think Beckett Seneca is the one guy that's really kind of stepped his game up, and still only rostered 44% of league. So he's somebody that if you can get off the wire, I think is somebody that you would love to add right now. But I do think that Cutter, Leo, Jackson Lacombe, all three of them represent really nice buy low options right now that probably aren't going to cost you a ton. And come playoff time, if they get back to where they were, you could be looking at a great piece to pick up here. So again, let's take a look at some of the teams that are at the bottom of the list. Dylan Strome for Leo Carlsson, I think, is a trade that makes a lot of sense that could probably go through. Even maybe a Matt Barzell for Leo Carlsson makes some sense to me. Cutter, I think, is obviously, given his shot volume, is going to be a little bit more difficult to acquire. I think his floor at least keeps owners somewhat happy with him, even if the production isn't always there. So like maybe you start with like a Brian Rust type of player for Cutter Gauthier. I mean, Jackson Lacombe, what are you looking at? Possibly like Josh Morrissey for Lacombe plus. Like these are the type of moves that can position you nicely for the playoffs. What are your thoughts here on the Anaheim Ducks being buy lows right now?
Yeah, I agree. I think Carlson in particular, the injury actually makes me feel a lot better about that drop off in his production. Sounds like it might have been a lingering issue, which would certainly explain a lot there. So, that prolonged cold streak included with the fact that we won't see him until after the Olympic break makes him pretty affordable on the fantasy trade market right now. Especially keep in mind, if he is ready to go once the NHL returns in late February, then you're essentially only missing out on another week and a half of fantasy production here. Something that could go over a lot of people's heads if they're just focused on that 3 to 5 week recovery timeline that we have right now. So yeah, I like Carlson a lot right now. Lacombe, probably one I'd be looking to get done in the next week and a half before the break. I just think, we've seen in the Four Nations last year, even like a guy like Harley, like what that did for kind of his overall perception in not just the hockey world, but fantasy circles as well. So I just think a strong performance for Lacombe for Team USA could really boost his perception around the fantasy value from the average player. So yeah, probably one I'm looking to get done beforehand just in case he does pop off for the Americans. I don't know how much run he'll get on that team, but certainly something to keep in mind. And then yeah, Seneca, probably the only other one I'm willing to move assets for in a redraft league. I think Cutter's interesting. For sure. I don't know. They seem to drop him down the lineup a little bit too frequently for my liking. And otherwise, I'm probably just going to keep a close eye out for the Ducks on the wire. As those fantasy playoffs near, I think Mason McTavish probably pretty close to hitting wire in a lot of leagues right now. So if you're in a position where you can kind of stash, maybe you've got, a top seed locked up heading into the playoffs, just look to add an extra Duck or two on your bench, see how the lineup's shaking up. Even a guy like Chris Kreider, I think, will be a really interesting streaming target down the stretch.
Yeah, and one name I did throw out potentially for Mason McTavish, you take a look at the brutal schedule for the Calgary Flames. I mean, maybe like a Nazem Kadri for McTavish gets it done. You could probably sell that owner and like, hey, Kadri might get traded at the deadline and be on a way better team, which honestly might be the case. And then trading him will be unfortunate. It's kind of you're kind of walking a tightrope there and hoping that he doesn't get moved, because if he stays in Calgary, the production's obviously not been there. The schedule's terrible. Let's go to Carolina now. Very similar to Montreal. I would be very happy to add a lot of the Carolina Hurricanes. When you're as good as they are, the schedule might not matter as much. Basically an average schedule for week one, but then it gets really strong into the semifinals and the finals. And, obviously guys like Sebastian Aho's been scorching hot. I think you're going to be paying a premium there. Seth Jarvis finally returned to the lineup. Svechnikov's catching some steam. Nikolai Ehlers, all guys that I would be happy to add to my playoff run. I think one player that in particular that would be probably pretty easy to acquire right now would be Shane Gostisbehere. He's just been so injured as of late. Like, I own Gostisbehere in 2 of my 3 leagues, and I'm getting very frustrated with how often I've got to add this guy to my IR plus, because he misses like 3 or 4 games and comes back for 3 or 4 games and he's back out of the lineup. So that frustration might be something that you could take advantage of and easily acquire somebody like Shane Gostisbehere. But like, again, let's go throw out some names here for teams that have bad schedules for some Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, why not like a Tom Wilson for Seth Jarvis? I think makes some sense. You go to the Islanders. I think the Islanders are one team that I'm really looking to move off of right now. Like Matt Barzal is somebody I'd be trying to trade high on right now, sell high on. Like just playing so many minutes with Bo Horvat out. When Horvat comes back, it's going to cool down a little bit. So like Barzal for Ehlers is something that I would be confident in looking at. Maybe Scheifele for Aho. They've both been playing extremely well. Velarde for Svechnikov. Hyman for Jarvis, maybe even. Crosby for Aho. Lots of options here. What are your thoughts on the Carolina Hurricanes?
Yeah, I think you've kind of nailed it as a whole. Jarvis and Aho are probably the two I'm, obviously the most keen on. The reason being Ehlers and Svechnikov, I think their places in that lineup just tend to fluctuate a little bit more. And I think if recent history, anything to go off of, Carolina, certainly a team that could add some more firepower up front at the deadline. So just something that I'm keeping in mind here. There could be an extra name or two that, kind of comes into consideration for us as we near the IRL trade deadline. And if that were to happen, I mean, we've seen it the last couple of years. Like I said, Jarvis, Aho, those are kind of the guys who really continue to see their minutes. And obviously Aho in particular is going to continue to be that pivot on the top line. So if I'm moving, real assets that I would otherwise feel good about having on my roster down the stretch, like Aho is going to be the one that I target. Jarvis after that, and then probably Svechnikov just because of his overall fantasy profile is just going to help you out a little bit more in those rounded categories leagues. And then probably Ehlers after that. Like I said, that ice time's been fluctuating a little bit this year. Been playing better of late, but I just someone that I can really see if they do add a little bit of firepower down the stretch, he'd be kind of the first one that takes a hit in terms of his overall usage. And big time agree with Gostisbehere as well. Just no competition for him for that power play time this year. So I feel really good about it whenever he is in the lineup.
Yeah, he's been solid whenever he's been in the lineup. It's just, can you get him in the lineup and keep him in the lineup? And yeah, I don't think he would cost much at all. Okay, a couple other teams to get to before we close things out here. And it's the San Jose Sharks and it's the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I think that there's names that you're probably worth keeping in mind or keeping an eye on if they hit the waiver wire. From the Sharks, like obviously Will Smith, Tyler Toffoli, William Eklund, those are players that you could probably make moves for that wouldn't cost a lot. They might even be available on your waiver wire. So those are players that are super interesting come playoff time. I think what's the most interesting about the Sharks is if you can get past week 1, man, they've got a fantastic week 23 schedule, and then the finals week, it's just the best schedule overall. I think they play 7 games in the final week of the season. So the Sharks are a really interesting target. Now, the options outside of Macklin Celebrini are just kind of okay. I think Will Smith's looks really good since coming back. Definitely somebody that I would be trying to acquire. Toffoli, Eklund, I mentioned them already. I think you could certainly kick the tires on Macklin Celebrini. I think the chances of you acquiring Macklin Celebrini are probably pretty slim. But again, if you take a look at the teams with the bad playoff schedules, like Kyle Connors is probably a decent starting block for Macklin Celebrini. What is your appetite for like Leon Draisaitl for Macklin Celebrini?
Oof.
Tough,
yeah,
right?
it would certainly, yeah, it's a tough sell. It'd certainly get the, the party started, get the conversation going. But yeah, I don't know. It would take some pretty large cojones to get that over the line and really send that offer out. But I mean, Celebrini's just been so good this year. You could certainly make the argument for it, especially down the stretch here. Obviously, you just feel a little bit better about Draisaitl kind of maintaining this elite production above expected with the surrounding cast there and how good he is himself. So yeah, I just, a little bit concerned. Also, kind of a small frame on a 19-year-old here. Do we see him waver down the stretch at all? Do we see him, finally pick up an injury or two? So a little bit more concerned there. Maybe I'm not moving at something as high end as Leon Draisaitl as guaranteed, but if you're feeling bold, certainly, I think it's justifiable. But otherwise, I agree. I think it's the Will Smiths, and otherwise, I think we'll just be really scraping the barrel here for guys that are going to be worth streaming come playoff time. It's going to be a matter of who's really ended up on that top line with Celebrini. Is it a guy like Colin Graff right now? Are you looking at a guy like Alex Wenberg on the power play to stream come playoff time? Does Michael Misa move up that lineup at all? So yeah, a lot of interesting names to kind of keep an eye on from a waiver wire perspective. And then do you really have the guts to put together the type of package it would take to bring home Macklin Celebrini, because it is going to cost, a guy like Leon Draisaitl to get it done.
Yeah, and like you said, it's Celebrity's getting it done night in and night out without playing with Connor McDavid. And you definitely feel a little bit more secure in the Leon play and consistency. But like, man, if I'm sitting on Macklin Celebrini, like that is what I'm looking for in return if I'm moving him for sure. One other name to throw out there, Kiefer Sherwood, obviously just recently acquired from the from the Vancouver Canucks by the San Jose Sharks. Somebody that in banger formats is, people might look at him going to San Jose and be like, I don't know what's going on here, but it's not like it was very good in Vancouver anyway. So Kiefer Sherwood, another name to keep in mind from the San Jose Sharks. And then finally, the Chicago Blackhawks. I think it's a lot of the same thing as the Sharks. The schedule is kind of the inverse. It's really good week one and then gets a little softer as the playoffs go on. Connor Bedard, I think, is probably a lot easier to acquire than Macklin Celebrini. He's been just kind of okay since coming back into the lineup. So I think it's an okay little buy low window here for him. And I think that, he would certainly be a little easier to acquire than somebody like Celebrini, but still not easy, right? Like you're probably looking at trading like a Mark Scheifele, a Sidney Crosby, Dylan Larkin type assets to start facilitating a Bedard trade. Frank Nazar returns to the lineup tonight. I think that he's a name that would be easy to acquire, that wouldn't cost a lot, that you could probably take a look at. Tyler Bertuzzi, we've been kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop with him all year. And when is he going to cool off? Hasn't really happened. I think he's somebody that you could certainly look at. Artem Levshunov, available on some waiver wires. If you're looking for some blue line help, makes some sense as well. Who are you looking at from the Chicago Blackhawks?
Yeah, I agree. It's, again, maybe just kicking the tires on Bedard and seeing what it might take to get a deal done there, because I would expect him to heat up again down the stretch. Bertuzzi is someone that I'm really interested in. I don't think it would take much to acquire at all on the trade market. And yeah, especially if he gets that exposure back to Bedard at 5v5, but just playing a ton of minutes regardless, and obviously on that PP1, and just been, for the most part, pretty productive all season long. So I feel really good about him being a valuable contributor down the stretch, and could potentially even see him hit the waiver wires in some more competitive or shallower leagues. Ownership sitting at 56% right now. But yeah, otherwise, I agree. I think Nazar is a guy worth keeping an eye on. Levshunov for sure, out there in almost 90% of leagues. So if you're looking for help on the blue line, don't really expect someone to challenge him for that PP1 time. Hasn't been a great source of fantasy production this season, but again, maybe that changes down the stretch here given the schedule. And again, otherwise, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but however this lineup shakes out come playoff time, there's going to be some names here that are worth streaming on a nightly basis, whether it be a Burakovsky, whether it be a Ryan Green. You're just going to be looking for that exposure to Bedard at PP1 and at 5v5.
Yeah, and obviously we're focusing on trading the players with the worst schedules for players with the best schedules. You don't always have to, make that, massive leap. But like, I think, obviously acquiring some of these players would be great. I think the most important thing to focus on is the players on your roster that have terrible schedules and trying to move off them for fair value for somebody with at least just a marginally better schedule. So again, like the Washington Capitals, if you're a Tom Wilson, selling high on Tom Wilson, getting back in the lineups, Dylan Strome, Alex Ovechkin, like even Jacob Chikrin to a certain degree, if you're getting a big blue liner in return, those are names. John Carlson, who's heated up as of late, like those are names that I'm certainly trying to move. You're going to have a lot less luck trying to move Calgary Flames, probably New York Islanders, but the Jets too, man, like the worst schedule in week one, they might not provide you with anything in the first week of the playoffs. And if, you could just be left like, oh yeah, I had Kyle Connor all year, but was it really worth it for the first round exit? So, really focusing on some of these bottom end teams and trying to move on. I think the Detroit Red Wings are in tough. Like even if you get past week one, not a great playoff schedule in the finals. So any final thoughts here on just some of these teams with bad schedules? And I know one name you wanted to talk about on today's show was Mark Stone and selling high on Mark Stone. And when you look at the playoff schedule, it's below average, it's average, and then it gets good to the finals. But if Mark Stone cools off the way he's been playing as of late, probably not getting to the finals anyway.
Yeah, I just think he's a name that I'd be throwing out there for a lot of the kind of the, maybe not the buy lows, but the guys with the better schedules down the stretch. I think there's some regression coming here either way. He's shooting 23% right now. The on-ice shooting percentage up around 17%. And obviously there's always injury concerns when we talk about Mark Stone. I mean, take it back to 2018-19. Last time he's played more than 66 games in a year. He's already missed 16 games this season. So I think you can really get people just caught up on that crazy raw stat line right now with 48 points in 32 games. And yeah, I mean, just not a lot of games coming from the Golden Knights and, some tough competition over those first 2 weeks. So he could be someone that's pretty quiet. If you make it to the finals with him on your roster, then great. But otherwise, yeah, we're looking at just 11 games down those final 3 weeks, only 2 of them on lighter nights. So even if you ship Stone off, you're going to have options to replace him with on your roster already on most of those nights. So yeah, just someone that I just have so many concerns with. And you add in the fact that, one of the most injury prone players in the league over the last half a decade now. I think he's a very obvious kind of sell high for me right now, and someone that I'm looking to shop, and I'll, would much rather have any of those other names that we threw out earlier with the strong schedules down the stretch.
Any final thoughts on any of these other teams with really terrible schedules? Is there anybody that's like on that list that's still, even if they have a bad playoff schedule, is kind of untradeable for you? Like, are you still holding on to a Kyle Connor?
Yeah, I like Connor. I would still hold near and dear. Like the cream rises, right? And these elite players are still going to find ways to produce down the stretch. They do it, night in and night out throughout the regular season against some of the tougher matchups. Obviously, the Avalanche, like middle of the road, I have no concerns about a McKinnon or a Netchess down the stretch, or a Makar for that matter. So, yeah, maybe a guy like Sidney Crosby is a name that I'm floating out a little bit in some of these trade discussions. But otherwise, yeah, I would agree. I think we've highlighted many of the names that I'm looking to sell for. The Rangers, if you're feeling bold, like where's Panarin going to end up if he does get moved at the deadline? Is he worth holding on to? I would kind of assume so, but we see it all the time. Like there's IRL trades can really, boost the player's fantasy value, or if they move to kind of a more stacked build of a lineup, really hurt it as well. So that's another one that I think is just going to be really interesting to watch down the stretch here, because otherwise I think the Rangers have a pretty nice underrated schedule to get you to the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is going to do it for this edition of the DFO Fantasy Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button so you never miss a DFO Fantasy Show. I'm Brock Seguin. This is Dylan Berthiaume. We'll see you guys back here next week.
See you, bud.
Thanks for watching this video. If you want more great fantasy hockey and betting content from myself, Carter Hutton, Matthew Barnaby, and the rest of the DFO analysts, make sure you subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel today and never miss a minute.